So the other day I was at the antique store and I found this really cool stack of old knitting and crochet magazines. And I got this whole stack of them for only $2, which is really amazing. And I wanted to try and knit something from one of these. So I picked out a pattern from this one to knit. It's called Bernat Handicrafter. Bernat is actually a really popular yarn brand in the US. I think it's most well known for the Bernat blanket yarn that we have, and it's called 15 Shrugs and Stoles. It was published in 1955, and the one that I was planning on doing, there's so many cute patterns in here, but I wanted to attempt to do, this one's really cute too. Where is it? This one right here. It's like a really cute little cropped cardigan type garment, and it seems really simple, which is why I chose it for the first one I want to do. So first I'm going to pick out my yarn. I think I'm just going to do a worsted weight yarn because that's what it looks like it is. It looks like originally it was knitted in whatever this is. So I usually wouldn't go with a color palette that was this neutral, but I wanted to go with something simple this time, and this is Pound of Love in the color Vanilla, and I wanted to try and pair it with this pack of yarn I got from Ice Yarns. It's super soft. You can see it kind of has that like halo effect that mohair does, but it's not mohair. I took the label off so I could see what it's made out of. Here it is. It's 77% acrylic, 21% polyamide, and 2% elastin. And it's 450 meters in a ball, which is a really good deal for the price that I got this. It was on sale, like super duper cheap. So I wanted to try and put these together. I know they're not like a perfect color match, but I'm going to knit up a swatch and see what it looks like. And this is what people call yarn barf. Okay, so I held these two together and made this little swatch. This is my yarn barf that I did not cut off from the rest of the ball, but was just not attached for some reason. So I'm going to pin this down and then measure out my stitches. It has a really nice like fuzzy halo effect on it right now. Not super fuzzy because this is like a very cheap mohair knockoff, but it's super soft and feels really nice. And then about 12 rows to 2 inches, 6 rows to 1 inch. So this is the gauge that they give us for this pattern. It's 9 stitches to 2 inches, 6 rows to 1 inch. So I measured out my swatch and it's about 6 rows to 1 inch, which is perfect. And then 9 stitches equals about 2.5 inches, which is a little bit bigger than the gauge they give us. However, I went to the front of the book and they have this little size guide here. Feel free to pause the video to look at it if you want to knit along with me. You can see that the bust size only goes up to 38 inches, and I need about a 40-inch bust size. So I did some calculations, and I figured out that if I just knit the smallest size with my adjusted gauge, then I should get about the right size that I need. So I'm just going to be working the smallest size, and then you can work whichever size that you need. Just make sure that you do a little swatch and figure out what your gauge is. So these are your cast on numbers for the 3 sizes, the smallest to the biggest. I'm just going to cast on the 75 stitches, and then we're going to work in stockinette stitch for 4 rows, ending with a purl row. So that means we're going to knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, and then purl a row. And then we're going to purl the next 2 rows. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'm going to be using 5.5 millimeter needles. They are connected, but I'm just going to be working flat. So I just did those 2 purl rows. It looks like this so far. And next in the pattern, it says to continue in stockinette stitch, increase 1 stitch each end of needle every 4th row 3 times. So that means that we are going to knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, and then the 4th row is when you do your increases. And they want you to do that 3 times, which would mean that you would increase 6 stitches total by the end of that. However, I like to do my increases on a knit row, so I'm instead going to do the first one, I'm going to increase on the third row, and then for the next two, I'll do increase on the fourth row, increase on the fourth row, and just make sure you do one at each end. Okay, so I just finished doing my third increase row. Since I'm doing the small size, I have 81 stitches on my needles. And the next step right now, we are at the shape sleeves portion, and it says increase 1 stitch at each end of needle every row 5 times. So that means that for the next 5 rows, we are going to increase 1 stitch at each end of needle. I just finished those 5 increase rows. It looks like this. This is just my marker to make sure I did all 5 rows. Next, we are right here at the beginning of each of the next 10 rows, cast on 2 stitches, and then after that, at the beginning of each of the next 2 rows, cast on 40 stitches. So you're going to cast on 2 stitches at the beginning of next 10 rows, and then cast on 40 stitches at the beginning of next 2 rows. Oh, and right now I have 91 stitches on my needles. This book doesn't have any specific cast on instructions, so when it says cast on at the beginning of the round, I've just been twisting it around like this, and then casting onto the needle like that. So again, it's like this, pull it, then that. And that's just the 2 cast on at the beginning of the needle, and then I've just been knitting those 2 loops, and then knitting to the end of the row. So we just finished all our cast on rows. These long ones here are the 40 stitch cast ons at the beginning of each row. And now they want you to place a marker on this row and then knit across back and forth in stockinette stitch for 2 inches. So measure your work until it measures 2 inches from the marker. And then on the next row after you do 2 inches, they want you to increase at each end. So like we did before, knit 2 and then increase, knit 2 and then increase, and then go to the end and increase before the last 2. And then they're going to have you do that 2 more times. So knit another 2 inches, increase at each end, and then knit another 2 inches and increase at each end. These should be your stitch numbers after you do all your cast-ons. And then after you do all those increases, these will be the stitch numbers for the small, medium, large. Okay, so I just finished doing those 3 increases. You do 2 inches increase, 2 inches increase, 2 inches increase. So I have about 6 inches from the marker now. And your current stitch number should be this one right here for each of the sizes. And now we are just going to knit 1 more inch until we have 7 inches total starting from the marker. So from the marker to your needles should be 7 inches. And then after you get to 7 inches from your marker to your needles, you are going to, on the next 2 rows, cast off 25 stitches at the beginning of each row, which is a total of 50 stitches. So we just bound off 25 stitches on the beginning of both of those next rows, and now we are going to bind off another 25 stitches, and then we are going to knit 35 after binding off. If you are doing the small size, if you're doing the medium, 36, if you're doing the large, 38. So this is after I cast off another 25 stitches, and this is my 35 stitches on the needle for the size small. And now we're going to put these stitches, the 35 or the 36 or 38, onto like a piece of scrap yarn or a stitch holder. I'm just going to use like a spare pair of circular needles I have, and then I'll show you what to do next. Now we're going to continue working this row, and we're going to bind off stitches for our neckline. I'm going to be binding off 27 stitches for the smallest size, and for the medium and the large you're going to bind off 29 stitches. Okay, I just bound off for the neckline, and now I'm just going to knit to the end of this row. Okay, now turn and bind off the first 25 stitches again. Okay, I bound off 25 stitches on this side and then purled to the end of the row. And now we should have, for the small size, 35 stitches left. The medium should be 36 and the large should be 38 left. So at the beginning of this row, for the small, we're going to bind off 5 stitches. For the medium, we're going to do 6, and for the large, we're going to do 8. And then we're going to knit to the end, and then you're going to turn it and bind off the rest of your stitches, which should be 30 stitches left. So I just finished casting off all my stitches for this side. This is where I just cut my yarn, and this I'm just going to pull out this loop and then weave it in later. And then now we can go back to this side, and we're going to turn it over. And then this is all the stitches that are going to be on your spare yarn or your stitch holder, or whatever you put it on earlier. And we're going to start from this end where the neck edge is, and I'm going to cast off 5 stitches. If you're going to do a medium, you're going to cast off 6. And if you're doing the large, I think you're going to cast off 8. Then purl to the end, flip it over, and then just on the next row, cast off the rest of your stitches. Okay, so I just cast off all my stitches. The back piece is finally finished. It took me so long to do. I don't know about you, but it was very long for me. And now we're going to do the left front, and basically the armhole shaping and everything is the exact same for the back. So just start by casting on 49 stitches, or 51 or 53 for the different sizes. And then do the 4 rows, ending with a purl row, purl the next 2 rows, and then you are going to start the increases. So increase every 4th row 3 times, and then every row 5 times. So this is what the left front looks like so far. If you need to go back and watch the part with the back, just keep doing the exact same increases, spacing them the exact same way. You just don't do anything on the other side. This I'm just doing like a little garter stitch edging so it looks really nice on this opening part of it. And then so just do it up until you get to the cast on part. And now at the beginning of the next row, you're going to cast on 2 stitches, knit to the end, purl a row, cast on 2 stitches, and you're going to do the cast on 2 stitches at this end 5 times so that it mirrors the back, and then you're going to cast on the 40 stitches on the next knit row. So after you cast on all your stitches, looks like this, and you should have 107 stitches if you're working the small, and then that's the medium and the large in the brackets. Just place your marker on this row and then work for 2 inches, and then do an increase at this end. 2 inches increase, 2 inches increase, 3 times like that, like you did for the back. And then just work until you have 7 inches from the marker. Okay, so I already started working my cast off, and that's because I tried to explain this once and I think I got it wrong actually, how the pattern wants you to do it. So just make sure that you knitted 7 inches from your marker. And then, so for this part, the shape, shoulder, and neck. So on the next row after you get your 7 inches, it should be a knit row. So we're starting at the arm edge, which is with the increases, and we're going to cast off 25 stitches and then knit to the end. And then over here, which is going to be your neck edge, you are going to cast off right here 25, 26, or 27 stitches, depending on if you're doing small, medium, large. And then you're gonna purl back to this edge after you casted off those stitches, And then we're going to cast off 25 stitches on going this way again on your knit row, knit to the end, and then we are going to cast off on your purl row. You're going to do 5, 6, or where is it? 7 stitches on that purl row, purl to the end, and then you're going to cast off the rest of your stitches, which should be 30 stitches. So to put it simply, cast off 25 stitches on your knit row, cast off 25, 26, or 27 stitches on your purl row, cast off 25 stitches on the next knit row, cast off 5, 6, or 7 stitches on your purl row, and then cast off the rest of the 30 stitches. Okay, so after you do all your cast offs, then the left front is finished, and the right front, it basically just says work to correspond to left front. So you're just going to do the exact same thing, but when you do your increases in your cast-ons for the arm, like these cast-ons, you're going to just do them at the other side rather than this one. So instead of doing them like knit 2 and then do your increase, you're going to knit to the end of your row, like 2 before the end, do your increases so that they're on the other side. And then once we get up to our increases over for the arm, I'm going to show you how to do the buttonholes. Okay, so I've just been working the right front to correspond with the left front, doing all my increases and cast-ons on the opposite side to the left front. And I just did my third increase row on the arm part, and this is where you space out your increases every 2 inches. So after your third one, you should have 6 inches from the marker. And after my third increase, I should have 110 stitches, and that's for the size small. The other sizes, you should have 112 and 114 stitches. And now I'm just going to purl 1 row, and then we're going to do the buttonholes on the next row. Okay, so now my next row is going to be where I start my buttonholes. And they want you to do like a simple cast off, cast on thing for the buttonholes. However, they want you to cast off 3 stitches, and I tried to do a little swatch of that, and it was too big for my buttons. These are the little buttons I have. They're little butterfly ones. And I don't like to have buttonholes be too big, so I'm going to just do like 2 cast offs, cast on. So what we're going to do is just, so here it says it, so we're just going to start at our straight edge where we have increases, and just work 2 stitches, so knit 2 stitches and then bind off the next 3 stitches it says, but I'm only going to do 2. Work 12 stitches. I'm going to add a 13th stitch because I'm only binding off 2 instead of the 3, and then bind off the next 3 stitches, 2 stitches for me again, and then work to the end of the row. And then when you do your purl row, the next row, you're going to cast on the stitches that you bound off. Okay, I'm back to where I cast off my stitches on the last round. And now I'm just going to cast on 2 stitches because I cast off the 2, and then continue on and do that again at the other buttonhole. Okay, and then you just knit your cast-ons on the next row, and then continue in stockinette stitch until it's 7 inches from the marker. Okay, I knitted to the 7 inches mark after my marker, and now we are going to do our casting off, and it's going to be backwards compared to the other one. I'll just tell you how to do it because it can be confusing. So on your next row, which should be a purl row, you are going to cast off 25 stitches, purl to the end, and then on your next knit row, you're going to cast off 25 stitches, or 26 or 27 for the medium and large, and then cast off on your, or knit to the end, cast off 25 stitches on the next purl row, purl to the end, then cast off 5, 6, or 7 stitches, depending on your side or your size on the next knit row, knit to the end, and then cast off the rest of your stitches on the next purl row. Right, Trish? You're on my pattern. Okay, once you finish knitting all 3 of the panels, you can go ahead and block them, and that's when you get them wet and then you pin them to the size that you want them to be. I am not going to block mine until it is finished because I want to try it on and see how it fits first and then block it out. And I'm just going to steam block it, I think, because that's quick and easy. But while you're blocking it, you can work on the cuffs and the collar. Okay, so for the collar, you're just going to cast on 3 stitches. Then go ahead, and what we're going to do for the very first row is we're going to increase on the first stitch. And how I like to do this is to just knit the front and the back of the stitch, just like that. If you need, just look up a tutorial for how to knit front and back. And then knit the next stitch, and then on the last one, we're going to knit the front and the back. So front and the back. So we increased 2 stitches, we now have 5 stitches. Go ahead, turn around and purl a row. And now we're basically just going to repeat our first row, and we're going to knit the first one front and back to do an increase, knit the next 3, and then the last one knit front and back. And then you're going to purl the next row, and then, so just do that same increase row 3 more times after this first one. Okay, so you should have repeated those 2 rows 4 times, just increasing the first stitch and the last stitch on your knit row, and then purl a row plain. And now we have another 2 row repeat that we're going to do, and it's really easy. We're just going to knit together the first 2 stitches, then we're going to knit to the end, and then on our last stitch we are going to increase. So I'm just going to knit the front and the back, and then you're going to purl the next row, and we're just going to repeat that knit together, increase at the end, and then purl row until our piece measures 16 inches. Okay, so after your piece measures about 16 inches, we're going to do decreases in the same way that we did our increases. So end on a purl row, and now we're going to knit the first 2 together, knit to the last 2 stitches, knit the last 2 together, purl a row, knit the first 2 together, knit the last 2 stitches, knit together, purl a row, until you have 3 stitches left, and then just cast off your 3 stitches. Okay, after you make the collar, the cuffs are really easy. You just cast on 56 stitches and then work in stocking knit stitch for 2 inches, and then just cast off and just do that 2 times. Okay, so when you're all ready to seam it together, now they first want you to hem this bottom part. So where this little purl bump is, you're going to fold it underneath like this. And basically, we're just going to sew it down to the back here. And just make sure that when you're sewing it to these little purl bumps on the back, that you're not like getting it so you can see it from the front, if that makes sense, because you don't want your fabric to dimple. So then after you hem the bottom of the front and the back, you're going to sew this together all the way up to the sleeve. And then you can cut your yarn, and then we're going to sew the top of the sleeve. Okay, so I went ahead and I pinned down the hem just to make it easier to sew. And see how you can see, like on the front, the dimples. Hopefully when the pins come out, you don't want it to look like that. So just be very careful not to sew it too tightly. So this is how I'm sewing the seam down. I'm just picking up like a little purl bump at the back and then just pulling it through. Okay, so I did my underarm seams and down the sides on both sides. And then, so for the top one, what I ended up doing is just sewing this entire seam up to here, which is 25 stitches from the end. So just count the 25 stitches here and just sew it up to there. And now for the collar, it basically, if you look at the picture, they want it to start like where the buttons are. So just slide it up. See, my buttonholes are here and here. So the collar, I'm going to sew it like here and then around and then to where the other one lies, if that makes sense. Okay, so I just placed the markers right where I want the collar to start. And then I'm gonna like divide my stitches in half, place one in the middle here, and then like place a marker in the middle of this just so I can line it up nice. Okay, and once your cuffs are done, go ahead and I just divided them into quarters, and I divided the sleeves into quarters, and then we're going to sew it on, and the corner markers are just to make sure that it's sewn on evenly. And basically, if you look at the paper, I don't have very good lighting right now, but it's basically sewn with this part out. So it would be sewn on like this basically. I'll sew it on and then I'll show you how it looks. Okay, at this point, if you want, you can be done and just block it out a final time, sew on your buttons, and then it's finished. However, the finishing part on the pattern recommends doing some single crochets on the front edge and then some slip stitches. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you where I put them all, just so you can get an idea. Okay, so I just finished blocking it. My buttons are so cute. It's still a little bit damp, but basically, so for the edging, I did like single crochets down here and then across the top. So, and I did that on both of the sides, and you just want your single crochets to be facing towards you, like with the good side facing up. And I used a 4mm crochet hook. Try it with a couple different sizes if you are able to, just to make sure that you're not getting too many single crochets or not enough, so that you just have a really nice straight edge. And then for the bottom edge, I did all around slip stitches, and I did it with the loops in the back like that. And it just really helped to like pull together the waistline, because my waistline was a little bit stretched out. So I used a 4mm crochet hook for this too, and that really pulled in my waistline, so I think it'll fit better now. And then I also did the slip stitches on the entire way around the collar, and again just with the little loops in the back. And then for the cuffs, I did single crochets all the way around, and also like these are half double crochets that I did down the edge here of the cuff opening. And I think we're about finished now. I'm gonna go try it on and see what it looks like. Okay, this is what it looks like on. I am really happy with how it turned out. The only part that I would have done differently is give it a little extra length, just because I didn't consider the fact that it was going to be extra cropped, but it's still super cute. And also, I wish the collar was a little bit bigger. I think that I made it a little too short lengthwise. But other than that, I really, really love how it turned out. Even the back is super cute. The back like looks really modern, I think, for some reason. Yeah, and the other thing that I would maybe add is another buttonhole down here, just because when you have, you know, a bigger chest, this is usually what happens. But other than that, I really, really love it. And thank you so much for watching till the end. Let me know if you'd like to see another tutorial for a vintage knitting project or crochet project like this. Also, let me know if you have any questions about the pattern down below. And that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you again soon.